Greetings, Kerbal Killers! Welcome back to Mod Mondays. This is the series where I show you what's inside the mods, I show you what you can change, the rest is up to you. Right, we're gonna start with taking a look at B9. Simply enough, game data ship source. Directory is of course the source code for the mod itself. Written in C#, don't think of the name then. So we're not going to go into that. Ships. Well, as you know, the B9 pack comes with ships. There they are. As mentioned before, craft files can be edited. Pretty much standard layout, absolutely nothing special there. Been through the ships, the craft files and save game files, which are pretty much the same thing. So, game data. What goodies have we got in game data? Yeah, got plenty of coffee. We have various other part or half mods installed, or framework mods. Comes with Module Manager 256, which is actually out of date. At the time of this recording, the up-to-date version is 2.5.10. Does it matter? Minor updates fix a few minor bugs that have been found, a little bit of optimization. You can always go and replace it anyway. Most of the mods that have been updated recently will have the latest mod manager. Speaking of coffee, just bear with me. That's better. Now, a lot of other things are included. Crossfeed enabler. This basically allows you to crossfeed fuels, etc., across parts and methods of connecting parts that would normally prevent cross-feeding fuel. So this small little mod is literally just a plugin to enable it. So there's a CFG file there, let's take a quickie look. It's basically using Module Manager language. So it basically says, for this part here, if crossfeed enabler is enabled, then it chucks that module in to the config. Simple enough, it goes through quite a few of them. It mainly is for RCS. Hi Marty. But it can work for the other fuels as well. If you've ever experienced anything weird going on with fuels and fuel draining in tanks, you might want to drop the crossfeed enabler. But then again, most people would probably be able to get away with using TAC fuel balancer. Sometimes having crossfeed enabler kind of helps you out. So that's pretty much all that can be configured. It's just a module manager config to add the module into certain parts. You can, of course, copy and paste that module into your own config. Fire Spitter. The Fire Spitter full-on mod comes with parts, planes, etc. Most of the mods don't distribute them. Instead, all they distribute is the DLL. So basically the Fire Spitter mod It gives you things like propellers, allows you to make propeller planes, helicopters, stuff like that. There's other things that it does as well, but that's mainly the gist of it. JSI basically comes with, it's kind of got stuff for career, which is what's in sort of agencies and whatnot, but it's mainly raster prop monitor. Raster prop monitor, for those cockpits that are enabled with raster prop monitor, allows the screens to come alive, indicators, switches that would normally not be. So in here it's basically just libraries of components, like stuff for the HUD. You've got the MFDs and things for the nav ball. Fonts, well, that's pretty much self-explanatory, that's just for text. These are, of course, PNGs, so you can change them. It does come with some parts, which is basically just an external camera. There is a CFG file in there. Pretty much a standard part CFG, except for that module there, which is the bit that loads the external camera, which can of course be placed on any part that you wish. Just copy that, place it in at the bottom of your part config. Rotate camera, that's in 3 dimensions, oddly enough, so that you can point it whichever way you want. -90 is probably straight down. But you can of course have multiples of these modules on the same part. Just make sure you change the camera ID for each one. It's got to be unique. Props. Props directories are like props on a film set. So, cockpit handles, for example. Does that look familiar from B9? Yep. It's got a model, and it's got its texture, and it does have a config. But that's all it is. Just a config to basically define what the prop is. Notice it starts prop. Still in the same type of syntax that we've seen all the way through. So you can, of course, make your own props. And of course, feel free to edit the texture as well. Indicator panel replacements. Well, it's PNGs and a config file. Pretty much going to be the same. Internal airlocks. Yep. Config file, model, texture file. Texture files can be edited, so can the config. But there's not going to be much in the config. Let's take a look again. That's it. Just tells you what it is. The IVA cockpits themselves call the individual modules. So these are basically just a list. Sounds. Well, strangely enough, it's exactly as it sounds. Pun intended. That's an OGG file. You will need the compressor decompressor for it. Of course I have it. Pretty much any audio editing software can be used. Free ones for Windows, probably looking at Audacity. Just do a search for it, it's free, and we like free. Textures, oh, a few of them in there. Could be used for anything. Plugins, that will be for the plugins themselves, and there is of course some configs. Take a quick ganders. RPMC variable handler. Well, RPM is rest prop monitor. Looks like it might be something internal. Kind of an interesting config. Probably not anything that's going to be useful to anyone modding the mods. Looks internal. I've never changed it. So maybe compatibility wise. But other than that, you've got the MacJeb RPM plugin, which links MacJeb with Rasterprop Monitor if you are using MacJeb, and you've got the Rasterprop Monitor PLL itself. Third-party support. This is always an interesting one. They're usually CFG files. And there we go. So straight away, we can tell by the start syntax it's used Module Manager to pull up that part name, and it looks like it's adding that into it, which is an external camera. So what it's basically doing is the mod creator is aware that some other mod out there uses the camera, so he's written a config for it to automatically detect if that mod is installed, and then automatically put his module in that part's config. Whoops, JSI here. RPM pod patches is basically patch files that use Module Manager to change the cockpits of things so that it will use Rasterprop Monitor. As you can see, quite a few of them there. Pick one at random. Whoops, no. So pretty much the same. Okay, let's get rid of that. Same format that we've been seeing all the way through. Right. Again, starts with prop. Well, it's not at prop, so it's not an update. So basically, it's saying load that monitor at that model with those textures. And then we're adding a ruckload of module information. Of course, can be changed at will. Now this lot here looks like it's setting up the MFDs. It'd be interesting to take a look at some of the ones that are already set up. Might be worth playing around with. Make your own page and whatnot. Pretty much self-explanatory. You got loading of various models and textures. It would help if I could highlight in a straight line. More textures on that page. And we'll scroll around. Well, interesting things going on here. This is the bit for the external cameras. So as we were talking before about having the external cameras on parts, that's where you can set them up. So pretty much mostly self-explanatory. Main thing that you need to know is the camera name, which we've mentioned. Field of view, the zoom, and zoom buttons. Should be able to work out pretty much everything from there. So these files are going to be pretty much the same. So we've done JSI. KindTech animations. Comes with the documentation directory. We love it when they do that, because the documentation should always give us full information about what the mod is, what it does, and hopefully give us some information about how to change things. Not always. So these files here, pretty much that's just the version number. There's an info file and the license text. In the plugin directory, it's just a DLL. The KindTech animation allows you to animate models. Oopsie daisy. Excuse me, I just need to go and insult somebody. So, if you want your model to move, say, I don't know, rotating hab, something like that, there are various frameworks out there that will allow you to do it. One of which is KindTech. Differences between them, well, to be honest, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Some modders prefer one plugin over another. They all have their merits, they all have their limitations. First, they're all about as good as each other. So, if you're into doing your models and you want rotation, KindTech is one of them to look at. Lockheed Martin gimbal. Just comes as a DLL. The KM gimbal is basically for certain engines that have more advanced gimballing on them. Things like, instead of with KSP, as soon as you hit like rotate to the left, the engine would throw itself all the way over to kick you round like a rudder. Whereas one of the things that the gimbal mods can do is to give you a slower progression from centre to hard over, so it doesn't instantly go over. That's kind of useful for people running far and near, that having a sudden change in thrust direction to basically what would make your plane side slip in an atmosphere would result in disintegration. So having that mod may make the difference between a plane where you would have to lock the gimbal on an engine and a plane that actually is super maneuverable. Other things that can be done is to limit the directions in which the engine can gimbal. So instead of being up, down, left, right, an engine might only be able to gimbal up and down. So that can be changed. MP Nazari. That's actually a plugin for hot rockets. A lot of the mod creators are aware that you don't generally just install one mod. You install a collection of them, and what they try and do is to make config files to automatically edit their own parts if you have another mod installed. So for example, let's take a look at this one. Well, that's boring. That just gives us a forum address, a date. I was looking forward to a nice juicy config file. That's a bit of a letdown. Oh well. What else have we got in here? ResGen. ResGen's quite an interesting mod because it gives you modules for parts that would basically allow you to convert one resource to another. Allows you to generate resources based on certain conditions. I've used ResGen before in a few custom models, and I find it quite good. It's quite lightweight, doesn't cripple your PC if you've got a lot of parts on there that have got that mod dual installed. It's fairly robust. The only issue that you've got to be careful of is when time warping or when the ship is not in focus. Because sometimes, and quite often, it will stop doing a conversion or stop doing a generation. And then if you're using it for recycling life support, for example, you would end up killing your Kerbal, which can get a little bit of an issue. It's not as bad as it was, but occasionally it will glitch out on you. So keep an eye on it. Quite often, if you detect that it glitches out, the vessel active again, stop and restart the generator, inverted commas, and then you should be good to go. Smoke screen. You gotta love smoke screen. Similar to hot rockets in the sense that it modifies the smoke coming out of the back of your rockets. As you can tell, text file, a readme, DLL, and a PNG. Uptime, about 30 minutes. So as you can see, this PNG here is just a button, but it can be edited. Not a great lot of things can be changed in smokescreen, however. So if you take a look at the README, it's very light. It's basically, as it says there, to change the smoke particles. Doesn't really tell you how to use it though. Virgin Galactic. Let's go in here. Comes with the DLL and licensing information. Have a look at the README. Yep. Oh! I need to change that. Definitely need to change that. Thank you for the host, Oak Tree. Most appreciated. So, again, we got another mod with not much in the README. Thank you, Skit. Which really does. A lot of these framework type mods are really let down by not having proper documentation. Where's my bot? Is my bot being a naughty bot again? Okay, my bot page crashed. Well, I think that answers the question of where my bot is. Give me a mo. Right, should have joined. Make sure it's a mod. There you go. Hey! Right, so Virgin Galactic, not quite sure about everything that it does, since I've hardly ever seen it being used. Simple thing to do. If you're interested, do a search on the KSP forums for basically Virgin Galactic. As I say, I'm not quite sure whether it's used that much. I'm sure if we start having a look through the parts, which we're going to do in a minute, within B9, we're going to find some reference to it somewhere. So, ship source been through. Somewhere in here. There we go. B9 directory. Comes with some agencies. Comes with various effects, including particle effects. New flame effects. We'll skip the parts for the moment. That's a nice juicy directory. Props. Been through the props in the Restoprop monitor. Same thing. Resources. It has a definition for some custom resources. If we take a look, B9 compressed air. Basically, this is you have some nozzles that use compressed air, similar to the principle of RCS. So since the game doesn't really have anything that can be used air, B9 creates its own. And of course you have compressed air tanks, and engines will produce compressed air as well. Resource stuff we've been through. Sounds. As it sounds, but intended. WAV files, OGG files. I think they're the that are generally used. Can be opened in any audio editor, including Audacity, which is highly recommended because it's free and it's really powerful. I use it, so of course I'm going to recommend it. Spaces, these are your IVAs. EVAs rather. No, I was right, IVAs. So when you have a cockpit, B9 comes with a lot of them, and you switch to IVA mode, it draws these models around the camera. So again, taking a look, as you can see, model, PNG, which is editable. Config, PNG, model, PNG, config, model, config, so on and so forth. Take a look at a config. Same syntax. Starts off with internal for creating your own IVA, and then gives it a name. Exactly the same as creating a part. So, loads a model, and it's that one, the HL model. And then loads a module. So in this one it's internal camera helper. That is a module built into KSP. As you move your mouse, it moves the head. Also loaded is the JSA. Anyone got any Fixodent? The JSI set internal camera. And the FOV is field of view. So that is a module for changing how the camera functions within your IVA. And sort of what can be seen, etc. Another module, internal seats. That is, for example, the Mark III pod. You have the center seat, left seat, right seat, and you have Kerbal sat in them. Kerbals need to be loaded, animated. That's how you do it. And there's another Kerbal. There's another one. Kerbal 1, Kerbal 2, or 3. Do you want them to have the helmet? Yes or no? Very important to make them take the helmets off inside an IVA. Module. Internal camera switch. A lot of cockpits have different camera modes inside the IVA mode itself. That basically just loads a module to allow camera switching. Again, more of them with different values. Those values are unique to the cockpit, and without loading the model and literally ripping it apart, then there's no way of telling what those reference points actually are. They could be the brace position, or they could be looking out of windows, or they could be a zoomed in view of an MFD, or there could be one of looking at the bathroom. Not got a clue. They're defined within the model itself. There are pretty much loads of them. Atmosphere depth is a prop, as you can see, rather than a module. So it's now loading props and animations into the cockpit itself. So now the atmosphere depth gauge is that thing that tells you how deep into the atmosphere you are. That little needle dial thing. And that defines its position, rotation, scale. Obviously, 3 dimensions. No, 3 dimensions for this one, 4 for that one. Fourth dimension, this is KSP. It's not time. And the scale, the X and Y scale. So now we have a B9 abort button. Again, it's another prop. Abort button 2, more buttons, 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 buttons. Indicators. Indicator, indicator, indicators, 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 and we've seen all of these props already. You create the prop and then you basically define that prop within the IVA cockpit or within whatever IVA space. Pretty much bog standard. And this goes on and on and on. The IVA configs are usually massive. Good luck on Holy Prognosis. So, all the configs in there are pretty much going to follow the same pattern as that one. They're going to be massive. Going through them, most of it's self-explanatory. If you're into doing IVAs, if you want to get into IVAs, suggest doing a search for stuff on the wikis. Even searching for values that are in configs themselves will yield information for you. Google is your friend. Trust me. I use Google quite a bit. Let's go and have a look at the really juicy directory, shall we? One thing that I love about the B9 parts is that they're not scattered in multiple directories. And more importantly, it tells me what type the part is for the underscore. So you've got adapters, aero, cargo, cockpit, control, engine, structure, utility. You might recognise them from some of the groups that are inside KSP. So we've got quite a few parts in there. They're all pretty much standard. Let's go and grab a cockpit. Cockpit HL. 2 texture files there. They can indeed be edited. They are standard PNGs. Model file and part config. Going straight in. Bog standard layout for part configs. Nothing special about them. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. They're standard layouts. Scrolling down, let's see what modules it's got. We've got a definition for the internal cockpit, which is the IVA mode. If you are like me and you have yanked out all of the cockpits to save on memory, you need to make sure that you pull that out as well. Otherwise, it will plaster your log file with errors. Well, not errors, but warnings. Module, that's a KSP module. We've been through it. It's just because it's a command module. Resource definition. Module for SAS, which comes with KSP. This cockpit has RCS ports built into it. So here it loads the RCS module so that KSP can hook into the RCS ports. Reaction wheel gets loaded. FS animation generic. That's fire spitter generic animation. So as I mentioned that you've got the Kindtech animation, fire spitter also does animations. So animation name is that one, which is defined within the model basically, and then it's just given a name on the graphics interface for you to click on and want to turn it off, and then basically just the generic name for both the actions. Module Science Experiments is a KSP module. Bog standard, but that just allows you to do crew reports, store data, all the rest of it. Science Container, well, that's for storing the science experiments. Right. Because this is a cockpit and it has an IVA mode, load the raster prop monitor computer. That way raster prop gets updated and loaded and you don't have a load of funky stuff going on within the cockpit itself. Thank you for the follow, Dirty Devil. Flag detail, decal module. This is what KSP put in 0.23 when they brought out the NASA pack, I believe. So that just splats your flag on the side of the part. As I said, pretty much standard layout. Few little additional modules. Nothing terribly difficult or cryptic. Most people try not to be cryptic about stuff, but at the same time they're not gonna blatantly advertise things. So we've been through the textures. Let's have a see here. My favourite wing. Let's take a look at my favourite wing. It's that great big wing that looks like commercial jet wing. So model file, texture file, part config. Take a look at the part config, exactly the same. Module there. Automatically loads the far wing aerodynamic module, because that type of wing, because it's so huge, you can't just let far figure itself based upon the model. basically the aerodynamics calculation for a wing that size, probably not going to be good for your PC. So B9 has basically given for some values. You can of course go in and edit them. It is kind of intelligent, and it does use Module Manager to put it in. So you got a few things going on in that, and I've probably just, yeah. What do the things do? Well, most of these are to do with the wing geometry, the wing size. So ones that I can recognise straight off the way is chord sweep, and well, you've got taper ratio and chord offsets. The chord is basically the length of the wing, roughly as an average of the thickness and size of the wing. Probably going to be the best way of describing it. Taper ratio is how quickly does the wing taper out to a point at the end. And then you've got the offset from org, which is origin. So each model has an origin somewhere, will be anywhere, and that basically says the chord is located X, Y, and Z from the origin. That way I can then calculate where the centre of lift is, and all its other wonderful values. Yeah, we don't want to save any changes. So one of the things I like to do with that wing is to chuck fuel tanks in it, which is simply a copy and paste. I take the config resource definitions for the orange tank and copy them into the wing. A wing that size doesn't have fuel tanks, really? Personally, yeah, something that size should have a tank in it. But I've shown you how to copy the resources over from one part to another. So if you want those wings to have nice big fuel tanks in them, go right ahead. It's up to you. Various other wings. Now, one thing that I do want to take a look at, make a point, making a look at, if I can find it. Thank you for the follow, Unholy Prognosis. Just one moment, let me go and find it. Where is it? Here we go, it's right above where I was looking. Typical that is, isn't it? Right. Aero wing control surfaces. There's quite a few configs in here. We do of course have texture files. Config, model, config, model, config, model, so on and so forth. Take a look at a config. Something very specific that I want to point out. Exactly the same config layout. Module control surface. This basically tells KSP that model is a control surface used for pitch, roll, yaw, etc. You also have various other values that go along with that for helping KSP calculate things. So drag coefficient, we've been through with wings. Deflection lift coefficient. Kind of touched on it with wings, but for control surfaces, when you, for example, pull back on the stick to raise the nose, the elevators at the back would come up, they'd point upwards. Now the air, when it hits the top of them, gets deflected up. Right? That's what this value is basically a coefficient for. How much the air gets deflected up, and therefore how much downforce is placed on the backside of the aircraft. Control surface range is in degrees, so 0 would be horizontal, for example, and then full control, full pullback, for example, would be 20 degrees to that config. So some people like to change that value. It's entirely up to yourselves. I'd recommend being very cautious going over 45 degrees. Control surface area, that's the area of the control surface itself. Make that bigger to give it more bite into the air. Again, we also load stuff for bar. So it tells you what drag it is. This is all to do with module manager, so, and then gives you boards, and because it's a control surface, maximum deflections, and a few other interesting values. Unfortunately, they are very complicated to understand unless you know exactly how the airflow works over a wing and control surface. Editing those values is probably not going to be something that you'd want to do. It'd be very simple. Being out by 0.1 on those variables would be a bad thing, especially in FAR. So might want to leave them alone for a little bit. But pointed out yet again, same style configs. Most of those definitions in there, if you read them, split out the words, they are pretty much self-explanatory. Any other special parts? Well, it's a mod. They're all special. Cargo stuff is pretty much just an animated model to open the bay doors. Cockpits we've been through. RCS blocks pretty much as standard for KSP, so we've been through them. Engines, again, pretty much standard. You've just got a few additional ones, a few funky ones, so on and so forth. Now, there is the VTOL engines in B9. At first glance, you would say, oh, how does that work? There's got to be something special in there. I'm afraid there isn't. The engine itself is basically just on a animated model that bends one way. It's just animated, and the reference point for the engine that is within the model follows basically the bend, and it's that simple. KSP knows this and automatically calculates the thrust direction. So, kinda not that spectacular. Docking ports, been through. The info drive is just annoying, personally. It just displays some random message at certain times, and don't really think it has any flight use other than possibly being hilarious. Landing gear, been through. Lights, don't think we've actually touched on lights. Essentially, lights, not that exciting. Standard config layout, and here's your lighting module. So basically, module name is module light, which is a KSP module. The light name is that one. That is a definition within the model itself. Is it dimmable? In this case it's set to true. Automatically dim, yes or no? Right, and then you've got the speed at which it goes from being dark to light, and the speed at which it goes from being light to dark, to more accurately simulate what would happen to a real light when you switch it on and switch it off. Resource amount, oops, this is always electric charge, and that's the units per second that it uses. Animation name is basically it makes the model itself brighter when you switch it on, which is what you'd expect. So you don't just see the light on the other parts, you also see excuse me, you also see the light itself getting lighter. Use resources, true. As I said, it's set up to use electricity at that rate per second. You can of course disable it. As with just about everything, comes with PNG textures. Feel free to make them pink. Nose cone science. This is actually kind of an interesting one. Again, textures. Get them any colour you want, including pink. Take a look at the config. Standard config layout. And there's the module that's rather interesting. FS fuel switch. It's fire splitter module. So resource names, structural, liquid fuel, oxidizer, monoprop. That would probably make no sense until you compare it with those values. These semicolons here match up with the semicolons there. So basically, the FS fuel switch gives you the option of changing fuel that's loaded in that part. You'll have your attention. Yep. Instead of having however many tanks, one for each different type of fuel, so you'd have one tank for liquid fuel only, one tank for LFO, one tank for Xeon, one tank for whatever, monoprop. You can use FS fuel switch module so that you only use one model and you just switch the fuel types. So for this one, first one is structural, the 0 value. That basically means it's got nothing in it, it's just a structural piece. The next config is liquid fuel, so that's liquid fuel only. And it contains 180 units. The third config, that is a comma, not a semicolon. So it's actually both of those resource types. And of course in here, the two resource types are separated by a comma. So it loads both of them in that one config option. And of course right at the end we've got monoprop. So you can add xenon gas resource to the end of that and give it a value in there. Base part mass, that is the mass of it when empty. So of course the resources that you're adding in have a density, and when you switch them the actual wet mass of the part changes. So again, tank masses, that helps to calculate the wet mass of the tank. The tank costs is basically the costs added on to the base cost that's up here. There we go. No, sorry, that one. I'm just showing you the configs. You want to cheat? Go right ahead. Display current tank cost. Set to true. That way it tells you how much it's going to cost you. Very interesting module in there. And if you take that module, configure it for all the resources that you use, so electric charge, monoprop, liquid fuel, LFO, xenon gas, just to name 6 of them. Put the values in there and copy that into your tanks. You will be able to get rid of a load of tanks. Getting rid of parts is a good thing because it reduces your memory footprint. Reducing your memory footprint means you reduce the amount of crashing you get in the game, especially when you put mods in. Something like B9 and Lackluster Labs are massive on memory usage. Now you can install other mods such as Active Texture Management that'll help you out here, but ATM gets complicated and can be fraught with pit holes that you will fall down in, and getting out of them not quite so simple, especially since I have a few that I haven't figured out yet. One of which is the small gear bay going leopard coloured. Thank you for the follow, LTL King. When I say leopard coloured, I mean it's black and white stripy now. Not quite sure what went on there, but oh well. Something else that I need to figure out. So that's the special one for the nose cone science that's in the B9 Aerospace. Everything else we've been through. Stack separators, they're all pretty much done the same way. Little tweaks here and there, values, but it's all pretty much standard. Struts, been through. One value that I will show you, however, which I don't think I showed you when we actually covered struts, is That one. Max length. The standard strut within KSP is set to 10 meters. I personally like to modify it to about 100. I really hate it when I can't get a strut long enough. Strength of your struts are there. Setting them a higher strength means that they'll be stronger. However, if you're using struts to attach something that's mounted via a radial decoupler, and the stronger you have that, the more force is going to be needed to apply to the struts to get it to break for the stage to fall off, which means you're at a greater risk of the stage, the engine, whatever it is, slamming right back into your tank that it's attached to. Lo and behold, it goes boom, and you don't go to space today. So play with that one at your own risk. What you can do, of course, is duplicate the config and use one part for one type of strutting and your super strut for something else, doing framework. Also comes with a texture file. Feel free to make it pink. So, everything else we've covered, gone through, so on and so forth. That's B9 covered. Next up, take a look at Deadly Reentry. Right, first thing you notice is a lot of configs in there. Don't be scared. Standard Deadly Reentry config, additional configs for stretchy tanks. Not sure what home is. Take a look. Doesn't tell me. Anyone in chat know what home is? In terms of KSP. What is home in terms of KSP? It's a mod of some sort. Anyone know? Everybody's running off to the plugin, the mod library now, and trying to do a search for it. Nope. Consider it homework. Anyway, config for KW Rocketry, specifically the fairings. So this is a module manager config. I knew that without pulling it up. So that's the part name, and what it's doing is it's reducing its maximum temperature, and then it's adding the heat shield to it. Don't forget, these are fairings, so these go around ships that need to be protected. So what it's doing is it's adding the module heat shield with direction and various other parameters. This config, of course, is commented so that you actually know what the values do. So again, looking down, 1250, 1250, 1250 seems to be about standard. So all it does is it adds that, well, that to the config of other parts. In this case, it's that part. So all of these configs in here, basically, well, not all of them, but most of them are just modifying other mods. Because everything likes to work with each other. Makes it so much easier. So you've got a config mod for reel shoots. Now you've got settings here, these three, the difficulty settings. Might want to leave them alone, but let's take a look. You can really make it difficult. Not exactly laid out brilliantly, fortunately. So you can create your own custom config. It might load it. So config name, basically. Shockwave multipliers, shockwave exponents, heat multipliers, temperature exponent, density exponent. This is all to do with the atmosphere and the way that it interacts with a part. This section is to do with crew G limits. Something that I know a lot of after this weekend, after killing 2 Kerbals, because I basically launched something that decided to start spinning round rapidly and splat the Kerbal up the side of the cockpit. For which I was not impressed. So Crew G clamp is if the G experienced by the Kerbal goes above that value, then it's going to get squished. The exponent for the G is all explained here. Right. If the G drops below 5, then as it says exactly here, the damage built up to the crew with sustained G or spiked G is reset. So even if your Kerbal experiences 29G briefly and it doesn't kill him, if you still have a sustained G above that value, you will eventually still kill him. Right. Warning level for G damage on your crew, and maximum amount of damage done to a Kerbal after that amount of damage, your Kerbal goes poof inside the cockpit. And yes, we're keeping this family friendly. Crew G kill chance. You've got a random chance of killing him instantly. Huh? Weird. That config there is actually for the Kerbal itself. If he goes over 1250, poof, say goodbye to Kerbal. Max temp scale, no explanation for it. Not got a clue. Dissipation is always to do with how quickly a part will get rid of heat. So if you atmo skim for say an atmospheric break, and you bounce off the atmosphere and go back up into orbit, you will get heating of parts around, say, the heat shield, but the heat shield itself will also retain heat because it's got capacity for heat, and that's what that value kind of says. It isn't a number, it's just on or off. Does it calculate it? Doesn't it? Legacy Aero, not found any info on that one at all. Use alternate density, not got a great deal of info for it, but those three configs are in the menu within KSP. Now that's the default settings. I haven't had any issues flying default settings. In fact, if anything, I found it rather easy. But as a general rule of thumb, I do run around in default settings. Although, probably really should try hard. But still. There'd be more explosions if I had it set to hard. I think I might just do that. Bearings. Now, which mod is this for? Does it tell us? Oh yes, procedural fairings. We like procedural fairings. Well, most of the time. So basically, all parts that have the module procedural fairings, excuse me, then it adds that to it, which basically gives it a heat shield. So all procedural fairings, the configs for those parts get modified so that they have a heat shield on them. A little bit of a readme here. Let's not. SPP. Anyone know what the mod SPP is? Oh, wait. I do. Stock plane parts. Yep. This config is Module Manager. It modifies the configs of stock plane parts and basically inserts whatever this is. So, Mark II cockpit standard gets modified because it's got a heat shield. Adapters, so on and so forth. Pretty much been through it. Wings. Oh. It searches for all of these wings and then changes its config to that, or adds it to it. Doesn't grab all wings, I have found. Thank you for the FOS. Thank you for the follow, rather. Marine Devil, I think that is. So, doesn't grab all of them. So if you have some of the wings from Lackluster Labs, I believe, do not have that module and those settings. So basically they are impervious to heat damage. Unless you really come in hard. In which case, I think you'd kill the Kerbal from G damage. You can go away. Assets. Buttons. Feel free to change them. Skip parts for a moment. Plugins. That's where your DLL is. Plugin data. Some various temporary data can be stored in there. Or at least it used to. I've not actually seen any in recent versions. Sounds. Well. We know the fire damage sound. The burning as it's coming in. And some stuff's getting too hot. Yep. That's the sound. It's in a WAV file. G-force damage, that's the sound done as the cable is taking a little bit too much G-force. Feel free to change this to heavy breathing. So, parts. Straight away, there's 4 heat shields there. 1.25 meter, 2.5, 3.75. For some reason, they skipped 5 meter. I went to 6.25. With config out on its own. Always curious when there's a config stuck out on its own. Let's take a look. Scrolling down, yeah, pretty much as normal. Yep. Here we go. Name, heat shield. This is how you turn your parts into a heat shield. All the explanation is here in comments. Probably want to leave the conductivity alone. Don't want to conduct heat away too quickly because that would imply that it's metallic. But not only that, you will get heating of parts that are not in the airflow, so surrounding parts. Ablative is ablative shielding. That basically is just the resource that it deducts from the heat shield itself. So as you're coming in, as it wears down the heat shield, that resource there gets depleted. If it goes to 0, then you're in trouble. So losses, there's a progression curve there, and of course all of its description. And don't forget, all heat shields come with built-in decoupler. So, deadly reentry is pretty much straightforward. Greetings, Taskuvari. How are you? So, deadly reentry is basically just atmospheric heating and G effects on the cable. So, not a lot to it, but you can change the values of the heat shields. You can make your own heat shields. You can rescale them and change how much ablative shielding each one has got. You can change the colour. World's your oyster. Oops. Just bear with me one moment. Sorry about that. Okay, next up, I'm going to take a look at hex trusses. This is Speedy's hex truss. Sort of covered it in another stream, but we're going to take a look at them. I kind of like the hex trusses, but they leave me wanting more of them. More, Speedy, more! Comes with a readme. It's just a parts mod. Hex trusses are just a parts mod. I kind of like them. Kind of unique. So again, configs, models, and there's a few normal textures. Normal textures going to be a bit of a pain to edit without specialist software, but feel free to play around with them. Normal textures are basically for lighting effects when there's light shining onto a surface. So instead of a surface being dull and flat, you can design the normal texture to reflect light at certain points and not reflect it at others. That's basically what the normal is for. Putting it in English. Not entirely accurate, but oh well. Best explanation. So if we have a look at these, standard model and config. Which one's this one? It's a hex truss adapter. Pretty much standard, no special modules. Very simple part to use. Looks pretty good. I enjoy using them. Hopefully going to be using them more in the not so distant future. So quite a few parts in there. It looks a bit of a mess in there, but actually there's no need to separate it out into folders. It would just get more awkward if you did that. So just a collection. I want more of them. Next up is Kerbal Attachment System. Comes with Module Manager that's way out of date. And we have a few configs in there. Settings config, and one for science, one for squad. Take a look at this. Settings. Pretty much, this is your key bindings. If you wanted to change your key bindings, this is the file to edit. So everything from grab, attach, winch again, rotors. Thank you for the follow, Nomadic Gamer, and telescopic arm. That's how you change the key binding. If you notice, it's not there within the game settings, or at least it wasn't the last time I went hunting for them. Take a look at squad. Module Manager configs. Again, it's adding a module onto certain configs that are already there. So this module is the KAS module grab. This allows a part to be grabbed. Now you've got various configurations here. Basically, can you attach it onto another part while the cable's carrying it? Yes or no? does it attach to his backpack? Is that the backpack one? Yes. Do you put it on the backpack when he's got it? Not sure what attach on static is. Never found the answer to that one. But some of them are true, some of them are false. And not entirely sure what that one's for. I assume it's for debug purposes, since when you actually try and attach something, it just sends you a message. However, these two are probably the most annoying variables you will ever come across. When you're carrying something on the Kerbal's back, these two variables control what the position is on his back. So anyone that's ever picked up the ground pylon will know that it's very close to the ground. If you try to carry an object that is too tall, thanks Curly. I knew there's a config somewhere for that one. I'll have to remember that one. Could get interesting. I'll come back to you on that one because I've got a question for you, Curly. Something interesting that I thought of that I haven't actually experimented with yet. So, EVA part position is the position of the part itself when he's carrying it on his back. And the EVA part DIR is the direction of the part. So is it rotated? Which direction, which way up is it? Thank you, Skit. There are other configs as well that get very, very funky. So when you drop a part, what position is it in? Is it rotated? Hang on, let me go sort the bot out. Not me, I'm not doing it. All the Nightbots might be affected, mods. Because it says here, important, Nightbot just recently restarted. Inconsistencies may occur in the control panel until the startup has completed. No, I can't make it join. Tell you what, we'll give it 5 minutes and then we'll try it again. So, you've also got add part mass. Is it storable? Storage size. And the rest we've been through. So, question for Curly. You might know this one. If you attach a pipe endpoint to a building, a static object, or the ground, and you then attach that to a fuel tank, if a ship around the other side of the planet attaches an endpoint to another static building or the ground, you feed fuel through the planet. Or did they actually put in code to prevent it? Because that could be interesting. Thank you, Skip. Again, rover wheels, they're all configured in here. So if you wanted to add your own custom part, or a part that you have in your game, to make it KAS grabbable, that is the module that you put in your part config. So let's go back here. Science. What do we have in here? That's the stuff for basically all the science experiments. So you can actually grab science experiments with KAS. Which is pretty much simple enough. Let's take a look in here. Textures can be edited. Yep. Thoughts occurred to me many times. So your pipe is here. That is the texture for it. If you wanted to turn it pink, you could do. They're just image files. Can be edited with free software such as GIMP, or if you've already got it, Photoshop, or any of the others. Sounds. These are all OGG files. Again, already mentioned they can be edited. Plugins. That's your KAS DLL. That's what gives you all the functionality of KAS. Parts. A lot of funky parts in KAS. The first one that people are going to be interested in is the container. These ones are model files, can't really edit them. However, this is a config file. We can edit config files. Standard layout until we get down to here. This bit will interest most people. Module, KAS module container. This is what makes a part a KAS module container, KAS container. And that is its size. The bigger that is, the more you can store in it. So feel free to, I don't know, for example, take a copy of the orange fuel tank, get rid of the resources, and make it a super huge KAS container. Why not? Probably be able to get to, what, 100,000 units in there? Something like that. KAS module grab is what you add to a part. Well, we've already been through it, but that's what you add to a part to make it grabbable. So there's two ways you can do it. I've shown you both. Which one you use is entirely up to you. Winches. Not had a chance to play with winches yet. Really need to. I feel like I'm missing out. Yeah, but let's take a look. Nothing editable except the config file. So, taking a look here, pretty much standard. Here's the module for winches. So if you wanted to make your own winch, this is how you do it. So name KAS module winch, maximum length 80, presumably meters. Cable spring. I'm guessing this is the bounciness, the stretchiness on the cable. Since it does seem to have that, it would be logical for that parameter to be related to it. Cable damper, that is basically when you yank something off the surface, for example, it obviously stretches the cable, and when it yanks it back up again and releases its tension, some of the energy is lost, otherwise it would just yo-yo forever and a day, and that's what that value controls. Cable width is obviously how big it is. Motor speed, so how fast it can winch it in. Motor acceleration, how fast it can get up to maximum speed. How much power does it use? Head transform name. That is to do with the model itself. It's a basically a tag within the model that's labelled up as, in this case, head, to signify where it is. So certain elements of this module require the head node within the model itself, basically so that you can switch out what type of head's actually on it. So you've got the claw, you've got the magnet one, I'm sure there's others. So head port node name, same as above. Connected port node name, same as above. Anchor node, they're all just nodes. These are positions within the model itself. EVA grab. That doesn't make any sense, that doesn't. Not quite sure what these four values are actually in here for. Grab. You grab the winch? No, I know what that is. Right. I'm impressed they actually implemented that. This is when you grab a part with the winch. This tells it which way around that it goes. Does it rotate slightly? When you pull it up to the craft, which sort of direction is it in on the cable? Probably the best way I can describe that. And same when you drop it, what does the part that you've just grabbed do? What's it? Which way does it fall? Does it rotate? Things like that. It's kind of gets complicated because, but still, you've got the values. You can always play around with them. Lock. Lock. Is that the winch lock? I assume that is values to control the winch lock. So basically, as you're winching it up, you can basically stop the motor and lock it in position so it's dangling underneath your craft. Which could always be quite fun if you've got two winches and two objects on each side. And that the child's game with the two balls on, that you bounce the balls top and bottom. I wonder if you could do that in KSP. So, that's the winch module. You then have the hooks. So you've got the anchor. Standard config till you get down here. There's the anchor module. Ground drag. Bounciness. Okay. Dynamic friction tells you what it is here. Very helpful. Static friction. What is a anchor? Well, think of a ship. Yes, you could use it on a ship. Now, I wonder if you could also use it on, say, a plane landing, should anyone have issues getting a plane to stop on the runway, or maybe using anchors to stop your ship on, say, the Mun or Minmus. You've also got module port, which basically tells the KAS system what the node is that the cable attaches to. So you've got, it says there, top on this one, node type KAS plug. Pretty sure that should always be KAS plug. Braking force. How much force, if applied to that joint, will it take to break it? And then transform name is that one. So when it's actually plugged in, it changes the model. And again, we've got KAS module grab, which means the cable can go out, grab the anchor and take it off and change it with something else. Let's take a look at magnet. That's odd. Why can I no longer... Just bear with me one moment, chat. I think Twitch might be having a few chat issues. Mine's just done something weird. Right. That should be behaving itself now. So if we take a look at magnets, standard config, and here we have KAS module magnets. Again, plenty of explanation. We like that. KAS module port, already been through. KAS module grab, we've already been through. So don't forget the magnet, does use power within the ship when activated. And of course, if you run out of power, it'll drop it. The KAS is relatively simple. However, there's one file that I haven't seen yet. Where is it? I need to go and find it, don't I? I don't think it's in there. It's missing. Why is it missing? There's a file that I don't have in that, and that is very, very weird. Just bear with me, I'm going to go and find it. Yep, that's the one. Now, why don't I have it on here? That's very weird. They've probably just moved it, but I'm going to show this anyway. Within a very old version of KAS for 2.3.5, in a config file called add module. Taking a look at that module, that config file, this is the list of parts that you are allowed to grab. This is the list of parts that you're allowed to store. Yes, it gets really tedious adding new parts in. So for example, the linear RCS, you've got the part position and direction while you're carrying it on EVA. You've got drop positions, add part mass, that is for both carrying and storage. Is it storable in a KAS container, or is it only carryable? Stored size in units. Can you attach on a part? Can you attach on EVA? Static objects? Or just test mode? Excuse me, for sending messages only. This file, when you start editing it, gets very big very quickly. Especially when you make very big KAS containers. As mentioned, you can convert a orange tank into a KAS container. You can convert a Mark III cargo bay into a KAS container, or a Mark III hull part. So you would be able to carry 1.25 meter tanks and engines, and probably 2.5 meter tanks and engines. So there we are, carrying tanks for tank life support. Now these values that I've put in, probably not going to look great when the Kerbal's carrying them, but it means you're able to send up spares and additional supplies. most importantly, is the stuff on comms. You have ever launched a probe and you have remote tech and you forget to put an antenna on it, or you forget to deploy it,